This stadium has two names, two identities that define football's importance to South Australia. The first is its given name, Amy Stadium. This is its sponsorship name given to it as football grew to national leagues, and teams from all around the country fought to wrestle a result out of generally competitive home teams. The second is its true name, Football Park, home of football. The SANFL was based here. Grand finals were played here. History was made here. The wings that Russell Ebert would gallop down. The post that denied Glenelg an unprecedented 50th goal in a game. The goal squares that contained a goal-hungry Rick Davies. And the centre square that Gary McIntosh turned into a boxing ring. I've got so many fond memories myself. Nigel Smart's last game. A desperate win over Essendon in 2009. Finals wins, thrashings, fine and poor performances alike. I felt so strongly about it that I thought I'd pay it a visit during this video's production. Oh dear. Sadly for the Crows, in 2020, the spiritual and physical home for South Australian football was getting as demolished as the Adelaide team was every week. The place so synonymous with the sport that it was even called Football Park was being torn down for a shitty new housing development. It was like the very soul of the Crows had been ripped out. And it wasn't just the soul that had left, there was a physical exodus. I touched on it a bit in part 5, but the list of players that had left in the 2010s was so good it could comfortably beat Adelaide's 2020 list. I mean, look at it. Not only did the Crows lose an insane amount of top-level talent, they also lost them practically for nothing. You'd expect to lose, say, half of these deals, that's just how things work. But to lose 17 of 18 and to scrape a break-even on the other one, that's something only the Adelaide list management can do. Or at least till Ned Guy pokes his head through the door. And then compare this to the dross that lost to the Gold Coast in 2020, a team Adelaide hadn't lost to since the Suns' inception, 10 years beforehand. The 2018 team was beleaguered, the 2019 team was disappointing, the 2020 team was simply incompetent. After some dreadful performances and injuries to both Crouch brothers Rory Sloane and Tom Lynch, new coach Matthew Nicks just decided to play the kids, until they started getting injured as well. Now, for the 2020 season, quarters were reduced to 15 minutes, meaning each game was now 20% shorter. The 2019 Crows averaged about 81 points per game and conceded about 80. Now, considering they lost all of this scoring potential, you'd expect a drop of a bit more than that 20% to compensate for the time lost. A bit. Not a lot. Not nearly 50%. Their opponents though, surely they've gotten worse too. Oh no, they haven't. Amazingly, Adelaide only had one of the 10 lowest scores, but conceded 3 of the 4 highest. 4 50-point plus losses, 1 to the 17th place team, 1 to their local rivals, 1 to a team with 2 similar losses, and 1 to a team that 10 short months before was perhaps the worst team I've ever seen. Hell, Adelaide beat the Suns by 95 points in 2019. The Crows would go on to only chalk up 1 more win in the next 400 days. That Gold Coast team lost the last 18 games of 2019 in a row by an average of 49 points. But they led 24% of their games. Adelaide, to their round 13 loss, had led 9. And the horrifying stats didn't stop there. Last in goals, last in pressure applied, 16th in contested possessions, 15th in contested marks, last in marks inside 50, last in 1%ers, bottom 4 in intercepts, 16th in kicks and disposals. The leading goal scorer on the Adelaide payroll was playing for Carlton. Clanger percentage, highest in the league. Nick Natanui, who our own ruckman said this about, had more hitouts than the entire team combined. They can't tackle to save their lives. You know who's in the league top 10 for that stat? These guys. They're last in scoring. These guys featured in the top 15 for goals throughout the season. Adelaide can't enter their forward 50 efficiently. Who's the best in the league? These lads. Be nice if they could win some contested clearances, maybe add some of the top 10. Wait, they already had 2 of those guys. Those are the same guys who lead contested ball use. They need more creativity in front of goal, but Adelaide have lost 3 of the top 20 goal assisters. The Crows have never kicked straight, they're bottom 4 for that. You know who's not? This fellow. The only Crows that make top 5 for any stat are Brad Crouch for clangers, and Riley O'Brien, the ruckman, for hitouts? No, wait, for contested marks. The ruckman is who they look for aerial dominance around the ground. Not the forwards, or key backs, or tough midfielders, or anyone you'd expect. Nope, it's the big lanky fella. Adelaide has a coach who hasn't won a game from 13, a game plan that doesn't look like it will win any of the next 13, and in 2 years, the best forward line has turned into the very worst, and is statistically without parallel in recent years. Still, at least they led one stat: players suspended due to COVID breaches. Okay, let's take a breath. I wrote that semi-rant mainly before September began, fully expecting to release this about a Crows side with, at most, 1 win come the end of the season. That win was likely to be against an old Hawthorn side, which the Crows won. And amazingly, they used that momentum to win the next match against the reigning grand finalist Giants. And then, a win against Carlton to set the streak to 3 and sending Bryce Gibbs out on a high, before fizzling in a spirited encounter against the Tigers. Although the Crows have hardly set the statisticians on fire, there was a renewed intensity. All they needed was that 1 win, the demon to be exorcised. No, not those demons, let's stay focused. In terms of pride, that 2020 win against the Hawks was almost as important as the 1991 victory against the same side. But they ended with 3 wins for the season, a tally which kinda flatters their early season form. As further proof that nothing really went right, look at Lachlan Scholl, the nephew of Craig, who was in North's losing 1998 grand final side. He had a best on ground performance against Carlton. He set records for metres gained in a quarter and kicked 2 pivotal goals in his 7th game. He ended up with the 3 Brownlow votes for that match. The football world was expecting a Rising Star nomination, which he got. A week later, even when a Crow was exceptional, they still couldn't do it properly. Dead last on the field, on the ladder, in relevance, even in the damn grand final sprint. They'd had so many people leave, so many new additions, that they were like a music track with 6 producers, elements chopping and changing so much that there was no left, and the mess was just getting louder, and all they needed to do was just calm the hell down. Thank you. And take stock. They had critics calling them the worst AFL team ever, but honestly, I've seen worse. This is every side to have finished last or close to it over the last 10 years. Aggregating the 2020 Crows stats to regular quarter lengths, as the fitness issues around pandemic restrictions saw them shortened, you can see that the Crows are actually stronger than a few of them, even with a massive in-season hiatus that they had to cope with. There's even some teams that avoided the wooden spoon that this 2020 team could probably down reasonably easily. They're not the worst team of all time, but they're at the top among those candidates. You could argue that they're the best worst team of all time. They still weren't free of culture issues though. Tyson Stengel had multiple issues throughout the year, and Brad Crouch went all Antoine Griezmann on everybody, before going all Marijana to continue the soccer theme. Stengel ended up being cut, while Crouch got his dream move to a capsizing St Kilda, his value lowering after his cocaine ban, which potentially cost the Crows pick 2 in the draft. Even though Sam Berry was a highlight of the next season, Errol Goulden or Braden Campbell would have been lovely additions. The Crows finished last and had their first ever number 1 pick. Until they didn't. The Bulldogs' academy bid on Jamara Ugelhagen meant the Crows' first pick became pick 2. Again, they still couldn't do anything right. Or could they? It's the first match of 2021. Adelaide are facing reigning grand finalists Geelong. This is James Rowe. He goes by Jimmy. He's an emerging mature age talent and reigning SANFL leading goal scorer, and Eagles boy, good on him. You may remember him as the only Crows father-son to have played a game, sort of. His dad, 29-gamer Stephen, is in the stadium watching him about to try for his first goal. He's excited. In fact, this is how excited he was.
Good boy! Oh, he needed an early one! Good boy, look at him go! I love footy.
See? I told you. And it was with that sort of energy that Adelaide bobbed right back up with to start 2021. Shoal, Berry, Jordan Butts and Will Hamill had hit the ground sprinting, ready to carry the Crows into the future. Ben Keys, a Brisbane reject, had slotted in to become Adelaide's best midfielder practically overnight. Hopes weren't good for the Three Towers though. Jacobs had just retired after being traded to the Giants. Talia was out for the season before it began, and Big Tex had just come off this statistical nightmare. But Walker, for once, wasn't playing through injuries. He blitzed the first 3 matches, outscoring his entire 2020 season. He tailed off as this sort of goal scoring is just unsustainable in the modern game, but he had just woken the hell up until he was put to sleep, robbing him of a potential common medal for a second time. Adelaide won that match against Geelong, and even built up a win streak, kind of. They even put in their best ever half of footy in front of goal. 14 goals straight at blustery York Park, including some pretty tidy finishes, it must be said. The number 2, number 1 pick got more goals on debut than any other Crow, including God himself, and he looked bloody good in doing so. Riley Thilthorpe. Riley Thilthorpe. Come on, I can't even say it. Riley Thilthorpe. Damn it. Riley Thilthorpe was officially born. But the stench of the loser was still hanging around. They choked that game. Their medical sub that day was a 30-year-old key forward who was already injured, and it took him 15 minutes to be activated. After their best ever first half, Adelaide only tacked on 2 more goals to lose, humiliatingly, to the 17th place side. The guys who carried the physical and emotional burden of the 7-year storm took a step back performance-wise, necessitating a season-long torch-handing moment that confirmed that the Adelaide Football Club was headed into a new, promising, but still uncertain era. The stretch after that Hawks game was the perfect example of this. The next month ran the gamut from insipid to inspired, culminating in a meeting against the 9-0 Demons. A lot of experienced players were out. No Crouch, no Talia, no Murphy, no Millerer. Even after a fast start, the kids could have crumbled. Hell, they had before to worse teams. The 2020 Crows would, and it looked like they were going to now. But then, Taylor Walker grabbed the game by the bootstraps and, with a little help, got to this moment. Now here is the list of every reigning wooden spooner in the last 2 decades to take down the team that was at the top of the ladder. Not many of them get the chance. And here was Walker's, after seasons of being maligned for really just existing. Finals were out of the question, but a goal here meant more than that. It symbolised the recovery of one of the worst teams that had ever been. It showed that the Big Texan was worthy of Modra's record of being the god of the New Crows Testament. And, of course, he slotted it. One media-driven shitstorm over a non-call later, and the Crows have a famous win that Bernie Vince weirdly stands out over. And then they crumbled and lost to the worst Collingwood side I've ever seen. Yeah, let Jamie Elliott score 4 goals in the first term on his return. Fantastic job, lads. Even worse, they didn't get a touch inside their forward 50 in the first quarter against the Saints the next week. It's the single worst quarter I've ever seen them play. It took over 45 minutes to score a major as Brad Crouch ran riot. But then the Crows kicked another. Then the Saints gapped the margin back to 36 again. And then the Crows hit back, again and again and again, scoring the next 6 consecutively, as Crouch's Saints got the sort of trembles one would have if, say, they were coming off a spell of a hard recreational drug. Oh, what a completely unrelated picture. The ball keeps finding its way into an Adelaide forward line that, let's be honest, wasn't suited to a dewy, humid night in Cairns, least of all their 200cm rookie. But said rookie does what the Crows do best, defy convention and logic. With 2 minutes to go and his side a goal down, he grabs an errant rider clearance and mashes a speculative pot shot over his head, which Darcy Fogarty shepherds through, handing the Crows a lead that they wouldn't surrender, and a win they kinda didn't deserve. Then a Crow almost broke football. Again. David McKay and Hunter Clark both bravely attacked the ball. Clark lost. And because he lost, so too did McKay have to. He was dragged through the mud by Dictator Christian and Jeff Gleishan, the AFL's official attack dog. McKay was, in essence, being litigated for playing football, in a case that could have destroyed the very fabric of what is a contact sport, and after 4 hours of deliberation, McKay won his freedom. Yeah, I would have hated for him to have missed these performances. Ugh. But still, at least random quirky bullshit wasn't still happening to the players. Oh, come on. In addition, Adelaide's historical ineptitude with injury communication and management was ever present, with Talia out for ages, Crouch in injury limbo, Lynch's aforementioned thing, Miller suffering setback after setback, and then this. I mean, if I was coach of a team that dropped from 12th to 16th in a month, I wouldn't let players skive off to arse about, especially to play frickin' golf. And rather fittingly, Adelaide's performance that week was under par. I'd like to think that the lockdown in South Australia that came immediately after that was caused by this awful performance, but it left Adelaide in a bit of a pickle. They had a match against Hawthorn to fly out to. They were denied clearance. Then plans were arranged to bring a fixture forward, and then another. Then they got flight clearance after the lockdown came into effect, negating the fixture changes but putting them in even more personal danger. True, it wasn't their fault that they were being shunted around like a turd in a sewage pipe, but it said a lot that after the last decade, this wasn't really seen as out of the ordinary. With all that on their minds, with their dignity and last place on the line against that Hawks team, they won. Admittedly, a couple of their goals were scored completely by accident, but they won. And this meant more than just a simple win against poor circumstances. This was defiance against the forces, internal and external, that were dragging them, screaming, back into 18th place. This was the victory that would turn them around. Except it wasn't. The final tower had fallen by the new god's own hand. Not only had he thrown away another Coleman Medal and All-Australian chance, but he'd renewed talks of a cultural issue within the club. He was suspended for 6 matches, with questions over whether the Crows would even retain their all-time leading goalscorer. And all this happened right before a showdown too against a top 4 Port Adelaide side, so a pummeling was inevitable. Which made it even more surprising that Adelaide did this. They were applying pressure, making a top 4 side commit uncharacteristic errors. Their backs were against the wall, but they kept their heads above water. And then Nick Murray and Will Hamill were performing admirably. With only 37 games played between them, they'd held their respective, more experienced opponents to have minimal impacts on the match. They both went in hard, and both went down hard. There was a sense of deja vu to it all. Fantasia's resulting goal allowed Port to close in and eventually overwhelm an Adelaide outfit with not one, but 2 concussions on its books. It was an honourable loss, but still it was a loss when they really needed a win. Another 3-quarter performance saw them through to the Battle of the Bottom. Losing was in the Crows' best interests here, let's be honest. A loss would secure pick 2 in the draft, whereas a win only gave them the slight pride of not joining North in becoming a club that finished in the bottom 2 in consecutive years. It was hard to gauge the players' own intent. The midfielders, especially young ruck phenom Kieran Strawn, seemed to want to end this thing quick, but the forwards shot for goal like 8-year-old children. Eventually though, they managed to win, giving fitting send-offs to the retiring David McKay and Tom Lynch by allowing them to both score goals and... Hang on, what was that? Lynch isn't retiring. Then why are they treating him like he's got 3 weeks left to live? Oh. A rebuild needs a steady hand on the reins, on and off the field. To the end of the 2021 season, only 8 Crows had over 150 games of experience. One of them was retiring, and one was now facing complete uncertainty over his future. Adelaide could hardly afford to lose further experience and leadership now. But Matty Nix decided to do a 23 skidoo on Adelaide's most trusted defensive lieutenant, and a man so vital to their forward structure that he was nicknamed the Connector. It was an appalling decision, especially considering that even the Wooden Spooners they rounded out the season against had a more experienced lineup. To understand why the Crows felt so comfortable delisting my 2 favourite players at once, you have to run through some quite encouraging numbers. Look at how the Wooden Spoon teams of the AFL era bounced back the year after. Of course you have the ridiculous early teens Eagles side who are just on another level. Then 2 sides with, extenuating circumstances, DQ them. Right after them you have a couple of bolters from the early 2000s, including the ridiculously inconsistent Ninthman era Tigers. And then a couple of expansion teams and the 2021 Crows, who actually didn't drop that much during that period where they fell away and apart. But hey, they're not awful, especially compared to this club that they almost joined. They're among the best worst teams of all time. So how do we end this then? A tier list? I could lazily do an all-time best 22, pretend to honour the club that way, and then call it a day. I'll do the first bit, but to end on that would be a disservice to 30 years of history, and the 30 years I spent editing this garbage. Some of these heroes even went the full distance and got into the Hall of Fame, and another couple are all but assured when they become eligible. But look at that lineup. For a club that's been around only about as long as I have, that's a ridiculous best 22 to be able to field. But how to finish this? I was originally going to do a list of things that I would do to turn the club around after 2020, such as drafting and trading, but by the time part 1 was done it was nearly December, so that wasn't happening. But even that would be short term. Too much of a short-sighted look following this long-winded journey. I wanted to find some deeper meaning, some hidden truths that the club represents, something that you, the viewer, can walk away with and think, boy, this was all worth the journey. So what does this all mean? Honestly, I'm not sure. It's hard to discern a meaning or any sort of lesson from a story without a definite ending, and one that doesn't even really have a purpose. The Crows are a team that defies conventional sense. Their best can't win them a flag, but their worst can. They trade out nobodies for superstars, and superstars for nothing. They're ready to torture themselves, but it's a complete disaster when others do it. They play some demented parlour games, but then when it comes to the only parlour game that counts, they choke on the game pieces. They can exude absolute perfection and lose, and show utter incompetence in winning. They were born in a courthouse, but emerged with the most passion and humanity of any team not just in their league, but their state and probably the country, excluding the Central Coast Mariners. For almost 30 years, They never really got to those zones that other teams have, the extreme highs, the extreme lows. And for a team that's had some extreme things happen to them, it seems that football is just something that also happens to them. So, in a quest to find that meaning, I wanted to go straight to the horses' mouths and talk to some of those who did battle for this cause. Tony Modra, Darren Jarman, Mark Rasciuto, Sam Jacobs, and Eddie Betts were all names that underpinned this series and were all far too expensive to book interviewing time for. But to interview the stars would be to defy the Crows' defiance of normal AFL standards. The most human club in Aussie sports needed points of view from their most human protagonists, not their golden statues. Fortunately, though, we were able to find someone who was a mix of both. 2019 AFLW Premiership star Marijana Rajcic.
Now, with your coaching box, the AFLW coaching box, it contains a few names that we've focused on in this series. In particular, of course, Doc Clark, Peter Caven, and Andy McLeod.
Yep.
What's it like receiving guidance from, there's no other word for it, icons of the club?
Yeah. Well, it's awesome because, I guess, Bungie, Roo, Goody, like I remember growing up watching them, like as a, 7, 8-year-old, they were the players that I remember, and, I would call out and watch and support. But it's been unbelievable learning from them and just having that guidance, and even just, especially with Cavo, just his knowledge in the back line and just being, I guess I've had a lot of one-on-one and reviews and just building that relationship and knowing, what he's achieved, but where he's come from, and then how far footy's come from. It's, it's funny how I talk to him and, he's like, back when I played, for the Crows, I was part-time. I was like you, I had another job, and then I'd come to the Crows, and, in terms of the men's game and how far that's kind of come around. So, it's been really, really awesome to kind of have them with us and helping us and guiding us and supporting us and always willing to help and do extras. Bungie would kick the ball with me all the time just to help me get my kick, especially a couple of years ago, we were kicking extra sessions once a week just to get that, for me personally, just having that someone just to help me kind of increase my skill level. So, yeah.
So finally, you're about to enter your 5th season at the Crows, 31 games played, I believe. Quite a good effort so far. So what does the Adelaide Football Club mean to you as a player, as a previous supporter, as someone who's gone along with the journey?
It's that the Crows are my family. Like it's an extended part of me now. It's amazing to have that connection and, just with my teammates and even just the club itself and just as a whole, just having that community, it's awesome just being a part of it. And I'm really, really grateful that I had the chance, and I'm glad I made the switch when I did. I've got lifelong friends and family now because of it, and something that I hold close to my heart. So yeah, it's been unbelievable.
Well, it sounds like a really personable sort of place, because the conclusion that I've sort of come to across the development of this series is that the Crows seem to be just the most human football club in Australia going around. They're just sort of there. They're personal. They do well, but they make mistakes and they come back and they just sort of keep fighting. There's a very human spirit about them. Is that sort of something that comes across from the inner sanctum?
Yeah. I mean, you said it right then and there. We're all human and we all make mistakes, and we also do some great things. So I think in terms of just we have good people in and amongst the footy club, which you want to have good people around you, because that makes it so much better going in, and you feel that you belong and you're cared for and you're looked after. So that's definitely the feeling that I get every time I step foot in the footy club.
Mariana's summed it up perfectly. Despite the hyper importance that, well, people like me place on this club, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of people running around trying to enjoy it. And because of that, Weird things are going to happen, especially as this club is pretty young compared to its peers. So of course the Crows aren't perfect. Of course there's been flaws. But it's these elements that give Adelaide a different identity to most. Don't believe me? Okay, here's your perfect storyline. Crows formed, dooming the SANFL yada yada, crush Hawks as they did, then we get to 1993. What a year they had when they converted accurately against Carlton. Boy, Sean Tasker did well with 5 goals. They got to the MCG, got 42 up at half time, and stayed there. Modra ekes his goal tally up above 130, but it's Tony McGuinness who wins the Premiership for the Crows and a Norm Smith medal for himself. They didn't collapse in 1994, that means no Robert Shaw. Chris Groom winds up as only a one-club flop, and a young SA Indigenous lad gets delisted by Freo in 2000 after a mediocre career. Sure, Corns steps down or whatever, Blight comes in and does what he does, even winning the first showdown, because of course they would, this club's too big for poetic justice. Tony Modra's leg doesn't snap, he steps up in 97, in 98, claims his winners' medals and Coleman medals, and you know what? He takes the thing by the horns and wins the Norm Smith in 1999. 7 goals on grand final day. Amazing. It sure was incredible how well those Crows drafted since then. The Crows beat the Eagles in 2005, their astute picking of Chapman, Petrie and Wells beat that stoic Swans defence on grand final day. 5 flags in 15 years, but they're not done. They back up again the next season. Mark Rasciuto wins a Norm Smith. 2007, Franklin lines up for his 7th. Oh no, he misses. Adelaide's through. 2009, Ben Rutten trips or something, so Anthony can't get the free kick. So close. Just like 2007, even though they lost the next week both times, so they're meaningless anyway. Just another finals run. No expectation, no agony, no ecstasy, no anything. And remember when the Crows overcame the odds and beat Hawthorn in 2012? Sydney the next week was a cakewalk. Hard to believe they've lost 3 grand finals to the Crows and still haven't won a flag since 1933. It was amazing to see Scott Thompson win the Brownlow, the Norm Smith and a Premiership all in 1 year. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame for sure now. Kurt Tippett got a nice goal. I'm so glad that he signed that long-term deal which didn't have any third-party payments involved to stay a Crow for life, because why would you do that? But Adelaide have got Jason Portlesia to thank for the win with that snap in the last minute. And there's Trent Henschel, retiring with a Premiership medal around his great gangly neck and 2 non-broken legs that he's currently standing on. My favourite was the 2017 Premiership, when Adelaide dominated the season and then just won the grand final by being the best team. I certainly wasn't expecting Walker to kick 5 and win the Norm Smith, but it was great to see Phil Walsh accept the Jock McHale medal. I hear Dusty Martin was so impressed with that squad that he shook off Richmond to move to the Crows, and the Tigers collapsed soon after. I'm not angry at all that Kyle Hardigan is a Premiership player, mainly because Rory Atkins was replaced in that squad by Scott Thompson, the now 4-time Premiership winner, going out in style. And here we are now in 2021 with a regular amount of wins, a club culture that isn't broken across a maniac's knee, an impossible amount of premierships and no wooden spoons or negative press at all. I sure do love Adelaide Football Club. What kind of a story is that? This isn't some saccharine Disney production. Everything isn't sunshine and rainbows. You want perfection and winning all the time? Check out the Crows AFLW team. Actually, even they've been hit with bad luck by association. This creation of fantasy reads more like a Hawthorn story, and everyone hates them. The Crows aren't about that. This team is all about the roller coaster ride. Of course it makes mistakes, it's human. It gets confident, it gets happy, it gets sad, it gets greedy, it farts in job interviews, it hurts itself. It's a human entity, this club. And the tragedies, the near misses, the devastation and the disappointment just make it even more so. And the fact that there's been so much of it in only 31 years is insane, and only serves to make that human entity even more intriguing as the outside world tries to figure out what it's going to do next. Will it draft a Fergus Watts as the first round pick or a Patrick Dangerfield? Will it pull off the greatest free agency coup of all time, or give a different coup to another team? Will it make the finals after a premiership, or miss them entirely? Will it knock down its own stadium right after spending millions on a training centre for it? Who knows? And it's taken their darkest hours for their true meaning to be released. It's unclear to see how much the poor on-field results of 2020 took a toll on memberships, as COVID is a major catalyst, but in prior years of darkness the members stuck together. They've only once before had a drop of even 2,000 members, and that was the year they won the minor Premiership. Again, it doesn't make sense, but considering the club, it makes all the sense. And yes, there's been a couple of awful seasons following an awful time, but we have to look at it for what it really is. A chapter. And chapters end. And then we'll have a whole new chapter to experience. So far there's been 5 distinct chapters of the Adelaide Football Club that have been passed over and lie dormant underneath the pages of chapter 6 in this big old book we're all reading. And soon this chapter 2 will be consigned to dormancy. These chapters have had everything. Heroes, villains, betrayal, redemption, tragedy, triumph, and there's so much more yet to unfold. So we have to let the part tell the whole. No one can be certain how long the Adelaide Football Club will last, but if its first 31 years are any indication, it will produce incredible stories right up until its final day. And that's it. It's over. Thank you all so much for your support of this series. Watching, liking the videos, and leaving comments. You guys have been awesome. We've got some series merch up on Redbubble, assuming the vague AFL copyright ban hammer hasn't flailed over toward it. So the link is in the description for that. I'm thinking of doing a Q&A to wrap everything up, so if you have any questions about the series, or if you have any favourite moments from this beautiful disaster of a team, comment down below. This is going to be the last multi-part series I do for a while. I just can't commit the time to a long series right now. But I'm hoping to do a video per month, roughly, so the next one's set for release just before Bathurst. Should be a good one. There's a few ideas that we do have now to follow that up, but if there's anything you want to see, as always, let me know, and I guess I'll catch you in a while.